What up, Joyriders? Today is Tuesday, July 9th, also known as the day Kristin leaves me for Grand Rapids, Michigan. Wah, wah. We're going to cover a few topics and then quickly jump into our special guest, Tom Webb. We're going over the APP Newport Beach, PPA San Clemente tournaments we just played. Guys, it's Pod 46. We got Tom Webb
in the mix.
Let's go.
Just knowing that there is somebody who is adjudicating on your game fairly, and you know, to
I'm sorry, could you use a smaller word? Do I have to spell that now?
I suspect that there may be a slight misunderstanding of what a national governing body actually is. The APP tour specifically is a highly competitive tour. You're seeing real competitors battling it out because they know that the further they go in a tournament, the more prize money they're being awarded. You have another business model in the pickleball world, which could be described as an exhibition series. So here's the other point. You mentioned 50,000. Nobody in pickleball has ever had 50,000 people tuning into a live stream.
You're tuned in now to this pickleball life. I'm K-Dubs and Jilly B is my wife. She's the pro and I've got the filler. She's sweet to me, but on the court she's a killer. Unadulterated and efficiently bringing you the best and worst things in PB. Tell your friends and stay for another. And no one loves us more than your mother. One thing's for sure, one hit and you're addicted. Grab a pile, grab a court, don't resist it. So click subscribe, let's go, let's get cracking. Theme song done, let's go, let's get laughing. This pickleball life.
Okay, Kristin. So we read on the last pod a little bit of a letter from my sister. Should we call that a love letter?
More like a Maya culpa? No, I'm just kidding. No, it's really great to see you and your sister finally ascend to pro pickleball together.
Well, so we won our first match at the PPA San Clemente.
Easily.
Pretty handily.
Yes.
Or as Brandon French would say, easily.
That's hard to shout, whisper.
Trying to be quiet. My mom is sleeping in the other room. And then we went into our second match and talk about sister on sister crime.
Indeed. Yeah. How many sisters are out on the PPA tour?
Well, we played the Walker sisters, and the first game I'm trying to cover like 87.4% of the court, and whichever Walker sister plays the right. And
they were like, yeah, Jill's probably going to cover 87% of the court, so just hit behind her every time.
Yeah, it was just like winner down Jill's line, winner down Jill's line, attack down Jill's line.
Worked again.
And like my coach, Scott Crandall, comes up and he's like, do you think you could maybe just cover like 60% of the court and like cover your line? So we get slaughtered in the first, totally my fault. And in the second, I'm like, okay, trust Natalie. Trust her. Let her take some balls. Trust. And we're down 8-1. So now it's like, we lose the first, like, I don't remember, 11-1 or 11-2.
Yeah, maybe I think it was 2.
And now we're down 8-1. And I just knew we were going to win that game. Then we're down like
champions
10-8,
find a way.
10-8. Down 10-9. Then it's 10-all. Natalie gets lobbed. I scream, I believe in you, as she runs back and gets it. I fall on the ground. She screams, get up. And then I get up and I go, I am up, as I'm hitting the next shot. So we're having like, at this point, it's like one of the biggest crowds I've ever had, not on center court or grandstand.
Yeah, totally. It was hometown big crowd. We had Brian out there with your mom and Dorothy. It was great. We had a bunch of people who were like, who is that loud chick over there? Let's go watch that.
So it's 10-all. Crowd is huge. And I'm just like, Natalie, okay, it's 10-all. Here's what happens. Everyone gets tight. First forehand you get, fire in front of you. And she hits this sickening little speed up right at, I think, Alex, who plays the left. Alex Walker.
Wait,
Angie catches her totally off guard. We win the point. We win the next point, and we win that second game.
Nuts.
I think that was the most impressive part of playing with my sister, was watching her play better in the tighter movements, because you can't take the athlete out of the, you can't take the class act top 10 tennis player, NCAA totally. All-American out of the player. You just put him in a different sport.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. No, Nocki is a competitor through and through.
And then in the third game, I'd say we lost that pretty handily. They had a good strategy. Their strategy was basically speed up at my sister, get her to kind of like take the bait, knowing she wasn't going to reset, and get in hands battles. And so I thought that was I thought that was how they beat us. They played cleaner. I thought they played a really good match. But hey, it was like
No, we
literally
mentioned
my sister's first tournament, so I'm proud of her.
Yeah, we gave the Walker sisters a props after they did pretty well at Los Cabs, so they're just circling back to what they always should have been, Southern California girls. They just play good in SoCal.
That's really funny.
But
That's
we were
really
watching a bit of video in prepreparation, and yeah, they're definitely getting better every month, getting better every tournament, and they have a lot of hitting. They have a lot of power, so you have to be able to neutralize that and force them to the slow game, and they actually dinked well.
Yeah.
So,
and my sister is still in that stage, which I'm sure everyone listening has gone through this stage where if someone hits it hard at you, it's just like, okay, let's go, right? Versus like, oh, I can take a step back and reset it. So it's just easy to play someone else's game.
Totally.
I think the better you get at pickleball, the more you're like, no, I'm not going to play your game. Like, I'm going to make you play under my terms.
Yeah.
And I think I'm just so excited to play with her again in October.
Totally. Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's go. So that'll be the APP Newport Part 2.
And then played with Jack Munro.
Oh, and then after the match, remember, Rafa was playing on the other court behind you and everyone started leaving. And he's like, yo, this is going to be a good match too. You guys don't have to leave. You can stay and watch us.
Rafa tried to recruit the crowd. Hey, I'm like the male version of her. Just stay on the court. Come over here.
Hey, for those of you who are not watching the pod, do you know what that sound is?
Oh, you're having a 7 a.m. rainstorm. Let's go.
7 a.m. rainstorm. You know what my favorite part about tournaments is? That Rainstorm sponsors both tours, so I always have my access to my morning rain.
That is so true. Well said.
Literally cannot play without it.
Yeah, that thing, Rainstorm, kept me alive over the weekend at the APP Newport Beach, which had an 11-hour day and then right after that a 10-hour day. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Wanted to ask you, what did you think of Jack Munro at PPA San Clemente playing with me? Way to go through qualifying.
Jack Munro,
for those
serves
that don't
righty,
know,
plays lefty. Best hair in the game, arguably. Maybe best dressed, depending on who you ask.
Best dressed, best hair in the game.
The youngest 5-0 in history. No, he's a class act. A really pleasant person to be around. A person that you never get tired of. Mm-hmm. And I think not a weird male ego problem. He wants to take the blame when it's his. And
trying to
ultimately,
make the right
you just
decisions.
ran into a Julian train. I mean, Julian played at least a 9.9 out of 10.
I think
for him.
Couple things that match. Yeah, we lost to Julian Arnold and Maggie Brasha. And, what's annoying about Maggie Brasha is she's always just like Maggie Brasha. I'm like, hey, can you have a bad day? Like, what is your problem? Just always steady and excellent at pickleball? Like,
I know.
Give a girl a bone.
I know. About
and so I think
sisters.
that match, Julian played out of his mind. I kind of don't have another word to describe it. And sometimes you just, like you said, you run into that. And I don't think Jack played his cleanest match. I definitely did not play my cleanest match.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're going to go up against Maggie and Julian, you got to play sharp.
Yeah, you were testing out a new two-handed forehand to that match as well.
That is really funny. We have to find some clips of that. I was testing out.
You got really excited. I found you on a court with Etta Wright. You were like, look, she has one too.
Okay, this is my problem. I play with my sister and then I pick up two-handed forehands. This is my problem. But yes, I was demoing a new shot that I quickly abandoned after that.
That's really funny.
I don't know how Jack can do the right and the left.
Why does he serve righty?
Maybe angles, trying to pull someone a little off. Right? Do you know?
Does he do it every time though? I'm gonna have to go back and watch video.
Does he switch to left when he's on the ad?
That's what I was curious about because it looked like he was serving righty both sides.
Oh my God. One day I'll be that talented. Just kidding. Never. Never.
Yeah. But definitely
did you see it?
Enjoyed
PPA San Clemente, the post, and it was the lines painted 3 feet too short on the PPA courts for the qualifying matches.
How did he depict that in a photo?
Because when they went to repaint them, you could see the old ones 3 feet too short from the baseline on both sides.
Oh my God, you're gonna have to send me that. Put it in the pod notes.
We'll put it here.
Yeah, for those of you
here.
not listening on YouTube or Spotify, this might be a good episode to at least tune into the intro to see some of the footage from the Walker sisters, as well as whatever this line painting fiasco is.
Anyway, is there anything else from PPA San Clemente?
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm sure we could give props to some people, but I'm too lazy and I didn't write it down. So
Amazing.
should we move on to APP Newport?
Yes. I blacked out. What happened at APP Newport? It's too much pickleball in a 48-hour period.
It's probably best that you do black out some of that. Jill had an inadvertent run-in with not really a net post, but a net foot. So if you know what I'm talking about, it's like the net post comes down and then needs some supports, unless it's a permanent net, which just goes into the ground. So basically your injury would not have happened if the nets had been like into a pole.
Yes, one keyboard warrior commented, "How is this chick always falling?" Well, let me explain that when your ankle literally lands on something that A, shouldn't be there, and B, your ankle shouldn't be on, and then it gives way, the worst thing you could do is not fall and try and stay standing.
That's for sure. I know. I always try to teach that to people when they're hiking or
Let it
skiing.
go.
It's like, you gotta let it fly. You know, you learn to skateboard, you learn how to tuck and roll.
Yeah.
But I will say that the question isn't really answered by that.
Yeah, there shouldn't.
Fact.
I would love for there not
what
to
I
be a
want to
foot.
say
It
is
should just be planted. The pole should be.
who isn't falling.
Yeah, it's true.
Like I'm not trying to throw shade here, but if you're not falling some of the time, you're not giving it your all. Like the fact that you're sometimes on the ground says that you are giving it your all and you're never giving up on a point. A lot of people would have seen that drop shot and just been like, 1 point, whatever. But you knew you could get there. And not only that, but softly drop it cross court into the kitchen. So unfortunately, when you touch the net post, that's illegal.
Well, again, I only touch it because I started to fall.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The ankle. Anyway, it's always fun on ESPN too to roll your ankle, which we'll play here. But thank you to everyone for reaching out. It's fine. And this is why we do prehab. Like I spend literally, 2 hours a day doing not like, hardcore weightlifting, but prehab. So I already work out
kind of
the
like
tiny
pre-hydration.
like I already work out the tiny little muscles in my ankles. Like I do all this band work, all these one leg balance exercises. And I do that with my wrists too. And I do it for one reason. And that's when you go to roll your ankle, when you go to fall on your wrist, you've done prehabilitation and the injury is, 20% as bad as it could have been.
Totally. Yeah. It's always so true. Like the things you don't see are the most important. It's impossible to know what that would have looked like had you not been doing all this prehab.
So
all
that
you
was
can do is just your best.
So that was the semifinals of women's.
Yes.
So we win the first game and I'm like, I have to get this taped. Like that's the worst thing is if you ever roll your ankle and then you roll it again, like that's what you want to prevent. So we taped it up and won the next game, go into the finals and then
so that was the semis. So
against
then you
Mari
taped
Humber
it up
and Susanna
and
Barr.
went into the final.
Best I've ever seen Susanna Barr play.
So you taped it up in the middle of that game.
The semis. No, at the end of the first game of the semis.
Right. So you had one more game in that match.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we beat Mari and Susanna in straight games. Like I said, best I've ever seen Susanna play. Huge kudos to her. She's working on her game, and it totally shows. And then we went into the finals, kind of a bit of a wait, which sucks with the ankle all messed up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a 2 hour
I thought
wait.
it was one match you had to wait for, but then they threw on the 9th place playoff before you guys. So that, I don't know. Maybe that was the previous day, but it was a little longer wait than
No, they did.
necessary.
Oh, wait, that was the previous day.
No, it was just that you played a semi and then they had another semi and then 2 men's semis. You guys were like the first semi. So yeah, it was a while.
And then going to the finals against Jana Newell and Emily Ackerman. I've played a lot of finals. I've played a lot of venues. I've played a lot of matches. I've never played a match that loud. Like not me, the crowd. Like that was wild. And it's my hometown.
Yeah,
so sorry, Emily, Jana, you're not allowed to have fans cheering louder than my fans in my hometown. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, it's because we live 2 hours away and Emily just moved 25 minutes away. So she got the trump card. No, really, it was that Jana is on the SoCal Hard Eights now. And prior to that, they had played Purple Jesus, Max Manthu, and Eric Lang, who are also on her team. So it was all Rick, the owner of the Hard Eights, paying off the crowd. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, Emily and Yana, are you listening? You're not going to have that next time.
Yeah. So he did a good job. I think he hosted a 4th of July party. And so everyone got to know the pros. And then when they showed up, they were like, really?
No, I'm really happy
pulling.
for them. They beat us in straight games, and I thought they could have beaten us with their eyes closed. They played so well. Yeah, they had the crowd. They were playing better than us. I think they had a better strategy than us. Yeah. And then, like, you know, if you go back and watch that, our middle was just wide open, and I just want to chalk that up to, like, you know, couldn't explode off my right side with my ankle as much as I wanted to. And, you know, next time, try it again. Try it again, Emily and Yana. Try it again.
You ready? You ready?
But no, huge kudos to them. And if I'm going to lose to anyone, Emily Ackerman or Cedarquist is such a class act, and my silver medalist partner in Cincinnati. So happy to see her doing well. And she got she got waived from, and then picked up to Premier as an alternate.
Picked up to Premier in lieu of Catherine Parento. So another SoCal team.
And I actually like to see, like, I love to see that, like, she gets waived, probably having, like, you know, the worst day of her pickleball career, being so upset, and then 5 days later wins a gold medal.
Yeah.
Steamrolls, like, through the draw, beats the 1 seed, Allison Harrison, Simone Jardim, beats me and Megan. Like, good for Emily. It was awesome.
Yeah. By the way, also, Simone got somewhat injured, had to take a medical timeout in that. So hope she's doing okay. And I feel like someone else also fell.
So the day before in mixed, we're playing our bronze medal match against Allison Harris and Andre Mick. And Allison appears to have rolled her ankle.
Yeah. Well, I hope she's okay too.
Yeah, I do too.
So
Can we
big
talk
props
about
real quick
Eric Oncins?
to the other Eric.
Lang.
But also Purple Jesus and Eric Lang came back in their finals against Will Howells and Jack Munro, right? And they won the gold medal. So
Craziest
crowd
match,
matters.
The craziest match I've ever seen. And this is what kills me about APP not streaming. And we're going to actually ask Tom Webb on this podcast why they don't stream more courts. And earlier, craziest match I've ever seen. Ryler DeHart, Eric Oncins, first round against Purple Jesus and Eric Lang. So remember, Purple Jesus and Eric Lang win the tournament, and they are down. As Ryler said in his Instagram post, Ryler had like a bajillion match points. Like, I think they were down 8 match points.
Did he spell bajillion?
I think he literally spelled bajillion. And Purple Jesus and Eric win that match 15-13.
In a game to 11.
In a third game. No, in a third game, yeah.
In a third game to 11.
Down 8 match points
13.
against Ryler and Eric. So, and they go and they win the whole tournament. So kudos to Ryler and Eric for being right there.
Yeah. And I was watching their semis and I was like, oh my God, this crowd is like going nuts for Max Manthrew, Purple Jesus. I didn't realize he had such a crowd. And that's when I was told, like, oh, it's the SoCal Hard Eights effect.
So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off on your big
Not at all.
but I had to mention that.
Please. Props away. Props are always props. But yeah, Eric Oncins, he was on. He was so fun to play with. I hope to see you guys on the court again together. He is also on an MLP Challenger team, the Miami team, right?
Yeah. I said this
we
in
will
my
be seeing
Instagram
more of
post.
him.
I think in the next 6 months, he's going to be top 30 in the world. He's moving to Nashville to train with Simone Jardim, who's his agent and coach.
Fellow Brazilian.
His father's the #1 male senior player in the world. So I felt like I was playing with the next, like, Andre Dascu. His style of play reminded me a lot of Andre, where it's like patient, patient, patient. I'm choosing the right shots. Most of his attacks were Ernie's. He's so long. He's so athletic.
Great hands.
The only other time I've been on a court with someone and had like goosebumps was when we found Jaume. I'm not saying we found him, right? But we recruited him to our MLP team as the 47th pick in the pickup last year. And Eric has that like joie, like playing joie, and that like special something.
Yeah, he has like the veteran aura as a rookie.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is like, there's you have a very strategic mindset. Not everyone who plays in the moment plays like a coach. You play like a coach. And then you have your coach, Scott Crandall, on the bench. And then you have Jaime Oncins, #1 senior pro, also Eric's dad, on the bench, all echoing like the same, keep focused, stay on that, target, keep working on the strategies working, like keep the faith. And I think a lot of mixed doubles is all these guys can hit it hard, but choosing when and where to hit it hard is the game of mixed doubles.
Well, I was talking to
Agree or disagree?
Richard Livernese, who the last time I felt that much pressure playing against a guy in pickleball, I was like Dekel Bar. Like, that's how he feels to me. I'm like, oh my God, I got to hit this drop perfect. Oh my God, I have to like hit this dink absolutely perfect because he can Ernie, he can Bert, he's everywhere, he's nowhere. Richard was saying every time I spit up at you, like, you were on it. And even when you're in the midcourt, like, I had to stop trying to put my putaways at you. And I think kind of what you're saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, is yes, men can hit it hard, but can they also play smart? Because if you get a really good girl on the court, like, she's designed in mixed doubles to defend and to counter.
Yeah, exactly.
So I love like just Eric's restraint. That's what I'm trying to say. The word restraint.
Discipline.
His discipline reminds me of Andre's.
Yeah, exactly.
And I can't remember the last time I was on a court with someone, especially that young, with that much discipline. Andre, that's the only other person.
And I would love to see the sport move more towards more coaching and like loosen the reins on coaching midpoint. Like, everything should be like MLP if you have one. Like, everyone should have someone on their bench reminding them what's what. And I think that's a great part of the game.
It was his first medal.
Oh, that's right.
And they asked us in the interview after our semis, like, what's your secret to success? And I was like, well, got Scott Crandall on my bench and he's got Jamie, and we're just trying to listen to everything they say. Coaches.
Totally.
Coaches.
Well, it's hard to see it all, while you're in the middle of defending and dinking. You can't see everything that a coach is watching, what the opponents are doing and how you and your partner are really covering the middle and all of those nuances. So can we talk about the clothing policy?
I was just going to say, we have to talk about the APP clothing policy.
Okay, so I'm still a little confused, but I'm gonna quickly read through and then I'm gonna explain my confusion. But basically, the APP is making some kind of effort to professionalize the look of their players. Okay, so that concept I can buy into, but my problem is that pickleball is in its heart and soul an irreverent sport.
Correct.
Like,
don't make it tennis.
It's blacktop basketball. It's not trying to be Wimbledon. But here's their clothing policy in summary. Team members are required to wear color matching apparel. So it can be top and bottom and opposites, but you have to match.
So for an example, in our quarterfinal against
Eric Pile and Rihanna Valdez,
they were not matching. So they were required to remove their shirts, not in public. They could go to the bathroom and do that. And they wore black APP t-shirts.
Yes.
Now, the real question is, do they have to buy those or were they provided?
So they are provided. But yeah, so basically, especially on streamed broadcast courts, like, they're trying to be a little more lax when it's not streamed, but they're trying to make the rule kind of all the time. And then they are going to have shirts on hand for those who can't wear their own shirts. And if you refuse, you won't be permitted to play. So here are the items that are not permitted. T-shirts. Okay, where do I go with this one? Where do you define a t-shirt, and what the F did they hand Rihanna and Eric? Because
those
that
were t-shirts.
Looks like t-shirts to me. So that was an interesting one.
Here's the one that scared the bejeebus out of me. Leggings, compression shorts. Thank God it says shorter than mid-thigh. Worn without an overshort or overskirt. So I think this is in an effort to prevent the booty short, the booty compression short.
There's a fine line between like the size of, like, I remember watching Christina Aguilera basically wearing like sequined like undies once at a The Voice, and I was like, are those technically pants or are those just undies with lots of sparkle? But the booty short where it's like volleyball length is what they're getting rid of, basically.
Sure.
Which I don't know, it's hard to measure the mid-thigh thing too. Then the next thing that's banned is shirts or tops that do not cover the back and torso, including cutoff shirts with wide armholes, a la, like, I remember
Muscle
Christian
tank.
Alshon like cutting his own MLP jerseys in the first season.
So this one was tough for me, right? Because I'm always wearing about as little amount of clothes as possible.
Yeah. Oh,
And
they
I
put an
basically
exception
always
for-
have my midriff.
Yeah.
So yeah, in the quarterfinals, Ken Hermann came out and was like with the head referee, and they were like looking at my tummy, asked me to like lift my arms. Or actually, I think I offered to lift my arms. I'm like, look, it stays. And I didn't have any midriff. I had to like lift my shorts up to make it so there wasn't like a millimeter of skin, and then they let me play.
Yeah.
It's like,
You're going to have a
God forbid,
crop top. You
like
got to have
a girl shows
high-waisted.
like an inch of tummy skin. Like I don't really get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Well, Yana had tummy visible in the finals. So I'm like, wait, so what are we even saying? They make an exception for quote unquote professional looking racerback style tank shirts. So I can understand that, something that's fitted is what they're looking for, not like wide, baggy kind of men's muscle tanks, I guess. Then cut off shirts and cut off shorts. So you got to have a seam.
Oh man,
Denim clothing.
No denim
You played
clothing?
someone wearing jeans literally at the PPA in Atlanta. That was really funny.
I did play someone wearing jeans in Atlanta.
And then a clothing that is sheer or see-through. That's like Tyra's favorite move. She has a lot of sheer stuff. So I guess a good thing she doesn't play the APP. And then logos that exceed 6 square inches, which I also saw a ton of with people's logos on the back. So maybe they only care on the front.
And then any other professional items of clothing or accessory as determined in the sole discretion of the APP. So I think the players with whom I had spoken over the weekend were like, this is never going to work. They tried this on the PPA. They've tried this 3 times on the PPA. Unless you're going to buy my clothes and
That's tough.
ensure that I match the perfect color green with my partner, unless you're going to foot the bill for that, you can't ask me to match.
Yeah, I saw a lot of black and white this week. I'm like, what colors do you have? Okay, black it is.
Other restrictions, Kristin.
Yes, so you cannot have certain embarrassing or distasteful products a la tobacco or e-cigarettes, firearms, or pornographic material. So I guess there goes our ongoing talks with Pornhub. We're done.
Other restrictions, competitive entities like MLP, Minor League Pickleball, UPA, PPA, NPL, and Duper. So to be clear, NPL, Duper, and PPA are on the same exact category as, tobacco and porn.
So
Prohibited.
I guess that doesn't apply to any other companies for now, but you get the gist. And we'll see what comes of it. I mean, this is like a big break for the APP now. So it's like the first week they unveil it. I feel like they're going to try and get more strict, and then we'll see if that can last. Did you want to briefly talk about MLP Australia? So I was chatting with Kyle Yates over the weekend. He actually played this event. We haven't seen too much of him this year. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, what is your plan? What are you playing in? What are you not playing in? And he was like, I'm going to PPA Australia. I'm going to MLP Australia, rather. And I didn't realize they'd had a draft, but I looked at the draft results, and it's like looking at the ghosts of pickleball's past. We've got Shelby Bates, we've got Wes Gabrielson, we got Michelle Esquivel in there, Daniel Moore. Who else did I see?
Kyle Yates, obviously.
Yeah,
That's
and then
really
some of
funny.
the players that are signed PPA but haven't been on a team, like Liz Trueluck.
That is so cool.
there's
I'm
Wes.
thrilled they're doing that in Australia. Wow, MLP Australia. Here we go.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the game continue to go international. So that's all. Congrats to everyone who got drafted. Oh, you know who else got drafted?
Who?
Your pickleball boyfriend.
Oh,
Not Jill's, but that's what his Instagram handle is.
Chan.
Our buddy Marcel, who's friends with Jaume.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah.
So on the topic of international, we have a really special guest, Tom Webb, and he is the CMO of the APP. We'll give him his proper introduction in a second, but he's going to talk a lot about international growth.
So here's Tom Webb.
All right, pod listeners, our next guest is the CMO of the APP Tour for the past 2 years, but his 30 years of experience in worldwide sports includes a background spanning from Formula One auto racing, America's Cup sailing, the Olympics, and, of course, my absolute favorite parallel to the pickleball journey in any industry, Major League Soccer. Tom, welcome to This Pickleball Life. Tell us a little bit how you got roped into this crazy pickleball world.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here with you guys today. I'm excited to have this conversation. So, my pickleball journey started with Steve Kuhn and Brooks Wiley and Melly Price at a meeting in Austin in 2021. And they said, we're going to launch this thing called Major League Pickleball. And what do you think? And I said, great. How much do you want to pay me? And they said, well, we got these really exciting plans. And I was kind of a little bit skeptical. And then, but within about a minute of meeting Steve and kind of getting into his, his aura and his orbit, I got fully on board with it. So I was really lucky to be part of the kind of foundation of Major League Pickleball. So Jill, you and I didn't really kind of I think we missed each other by weeks, maybe even days.
Well, what's so funny is when you're saying your journey in pickleball started with Melly Price and Steve Kuhn and Brooks Wiley in the first MLP.
Yes.
I'm thinking, is he talking about my journey?
I know.
And then
How many people can say that?
Well, and then I remembered there was this Tom Webb right when I started. I kept hearing the name Tom Webb, Tom Webb. And as you're telling the story, I'm just putting it together, the Tom Webb.
Yeah. Well,
I'm
it was
totally doing that too.
I was really lucky, as I say, because I'd been working in Austin with the MLS team here, Austin FC, helping them kind of get off the ground, get launched. And one of the things I said to Steve is, I think the opportunity is there to kind of apply, elite level sports standards to what you want to do. And he gave me pretty free rein to be able to do that. So I was with those guys for nearly a year, I think, and then went into another job. But then got a call from the folks at Intersport, and they said, would you like to come and have a chat with us about the APP? I'd been really impressed by their attitude. And the thing that kind of had most, I guess, impressed me was that they just seemed like good people. They had very strong ethics and they wanted to do right by the people who played pickleball. So was really lucky to accept a role with them and have been now working with that group on the APP ever since. Loving it.
And just to rewind for some of our listeners who are either new or not as inundated in pickleball politics as Kristin, Tom, and I have been for the past 3-4 years, there was multiple moments in time where MLP and APP were going to partner. And there was this triumvirate, right? There was PPA, APP, MLP, and it was always like, who were the two that would end up working together? And nobody thought it was going to be MLP and PPA because APP and MLP had aligned on so many of their principles, their morals, their goals. And so that's just a little bit of background for those that didn't know.
Yeah, I remember some of the conversations that I heard back from Melly and Brooks and Steve about the original conversations that have been taking place with some of the folks in Dallas. There was some extremely negative feedback on how those conversations went. I kind of wondered at the time, what on earth have I got myself into here? This is a sport which is just founded on so much fun, and everybody who plays it plays with a smile on their face, and everybody who I come into contact with, whether young or old, pro or amateur, their love of the sport is the thing that underpins every single thing that they want to talk about. And yet here we are straight away kind of talking about ownership of a sport. We're talking about some kind of some of the things that I think are antithetical to what makes pickleball so great. So I have to say I'm really pleased now, and I'm obviously biased, but the people at the APP have that ethos. We have a very, very strong belief in doing right by people and by having good ethics and good morals. When Ken first founded it, he was the originator of this amateur and pro tour model. 2019, he was the first person that put his money where his mouth is. He was the one who started this thing that is now being copied and emulated by others. But he said from the very first time that he put on a tournament, I want to make sure that everybody who plays my events has as positive experience as possible.
And you can absolutely feel that when you go to APP. I mean, Ken Hermann, if you don't already know, is who we're talking about here. And he had a background in junior tennis, even with Jill's sister. And
Pro tennis.
Every interaction I've ever had with him has been eye contact and genuine. And how are you? And what can I do for you?
When you see Ken at an event, The man covers more mileage than anybody
Yes.
on the planet. I would hate to see what his step count is per day.
Oh my God, I would love to see his step count. I'm literally going to have to ask him the next time I see him.
And I'd love to talk about APP events. I think what Kristin's hinted at, and I feel too, is they're very different. You know, I play PPA events, I play MLP, I play APP, and I can only speak for myself that when I play those events, everyone is super happy. The players, the amateur players, the employees, the volunteers. It's an interesting atmosphere. Talk to us about what makes these events different, and your upcoming Newport event, which I understand is the largest event outside of USA Pickleball Nationals.
And US Open, I should stress that. That is obviously a standard setter as well. So what is it that makes our events different? There's some basic things. You know, every match is refereed. That's an important part of, and that's part of the experience, right? I mean, if you've entered a competition, you know, whether you're a first-time amateur or you're a seasoned pro, just knowing that there is somebody who is adjudicating on your game fairly, and you know, to
I'm sorry, could you use a smaller word? Do I have to spell that now?
I'll put the definition on the screen.
Thank you so much.
So, somebody who's running things properly,
Perfect.
you know, and independently. I think that's part of it. But you know, right down to the little details. You know, our ops guys spend a huge amount of time mapping out the space between each court. You know, they're thinking about, like, how can we make sure that players have got enough space to be able to play competitively, you know, without running into the people on the court next to them. You know, how do the amateurs get treated to, you know, food and beverage? How are we making sure that everybody is being looked after to a way that kind of exceeds expectations? So it really is an absolutely kind of critical part of Ken's ethos, and it's one that we continue and will always have, right, as the kind of the main focus of our activity, is making sure that whether you've played a lot of tournaments before or whether you've come along for the first time, that you leave thinking, I was really well treated. I was treated with respect, and I was treated with some dignity, and as I say, in a way that kind of reflects what makes this sport great.
Yeah.
It's
What was
definitely
interesting, super interesting at this last PPA in San Clemente, and I meant to talk about this on our next pod, the professional qualifier first round was not refed. It was ref started, which was a phrase I had never heard before. Thought that was interesting.
That is interesting. I think, you know, at least some efforts are being made, if not being followed through. But again, like, to us, it's a really important part of not just the tournament experience, but also the relationship with USA Pickleball. You know, we're officially sanctioned by them, and I think the future of the sport demands that you have that kind of independent national governing body that is able to apply the same rules and regulations wherever you go, irrespective of who you are and where you're playing.
So when you sanction an event, when USAP sanctions one of your events, what does that mean you guys have to do?
So a couple of things in simple terms. One of them is they are in charge of the rules and regulations. It is not up to us to determine, you know, specifics about the specific decisions that officials are making. That means players can't have an impact or an input into the way that their matches are being refereed and officiated. And I think thinking long term, that's a really, really important part of the way that the sport is going to evolve. You know, we'll talk about the Olympics and about Olympic aspirations. And I've talked a little bit about this before. I've been very lucky to work in the Olympic space in winter and summer games. So I've had a bit of exposure to it. But if the sport has true Olympic aspirations, it's going to need to have a national governing body, not just here in America, but worldwide. It's going to need to have those organizations which are playing to the same set of standards and rules wherever they go. It also means things like paddle testing, for example, paddle testing being carried out by USAP. Now, I know there's some discussions going on about paddles and, you know, there's some politics and involved in that. And I know recently you've been talking about that on the podcast as well.
Too much, please. Not this one. I give up. Uncle.
The important word there is independent. Independence is the third party experience. There is no internal influence of we're making the rules up as we go to benefit what we want our tour to look like. It's here's the game of pickleball with the rules that have been established, and we're going to apply them to making a product that people can view. and not muddling the waters with who we're favoring and what kind of influence we are putting forth, right?
Yeah, I don't want to go into great detail about other guests that you've had, but you recently had somebody on who was talking about the formation of another, in inverted commas, national governing body. With great respect to that conversation, I suspect that there may be a slight misunderstanding of what a national governing body actually is. Because there was a comment made about the fact that very few sports have one national governing body, which is completely untrue. That's
what I thought at the time. So I'm glad that you're here to help educate.
In some ways, it's
And our listeners.
a slightly concerning statement to make, because it shows somewhat lack of understanding about the role of, for example, FIFA in soccer worldwide. I call it football, over here, obviously soccer. The International Cricket Council, the worldwide leaders of one of the world's biggest sports. Every single Olympic national governing body in this country, and I think there's over 48, 49 of them, they're all single entity national governing bodies who then effectively report up to the IOC. So credible, serious sport has single entity national governing bodies. In this case, it's USA Pickleball. So for somebody to stand up and say, we formed our own national governing body, but then not to look at all of the roles and responsibilities of an NGB from grassroots right up to the elite level, again, slightly demonstrates perhaps a lack of understanding about what the true role of a national governing body is. And I think that independence absolutely is part of that. You cannot have a national governing body, again, for a sport with Olympic aspirations, which has any sort of undue influence, particularly from the athletes that play within that sport's events. And I don't know whether or not there is any influence exerted by other athletes in other organisations within this sport. But the importance of having independence, as you said, Kristin, is absolutely critical to the future aspirations of the sport.
So obviously, I think the general public has certain aspects of frustrations or qualms about things that USAP may or may not be doing well or to the way they would want it to be done. Do you think that the USAP is run with people who have a vision for the future of the sport? Do you fully believe that the critics are just wrong, or where do we stand with the future of USAP? Because obviously, as we mentioned, there's been some talk about paddles, but do you think that the USAP really has what it takes for the long haul of this sport?
So I think the simple answer to that is yes, I absolutely do. I have full confidence that USA Pickleball is the governing body that will take this sport into its Olympic aspirations. It has already been established for decades, and under recent leadership changes, I think has taken a significant step forward in terms of the way it is structured, in terms of the way it is being managed internally. There are some very, very smart people who have come on board there recently with some very, very good long-term plans. We're privy to quite a lot of the planning that they're doing, not just here in America, but also on the international stage, and looking at how they can support the growth of the game internationally. And that's really, really important. That's important both in terms of achieving that Olympic dream one day, but also in terms of being able to expose players to other players internationally and help grow other events that create more earning opportunities for pros and create more kind of viewing opportunities for amateurs. So I think you will find with any national governing body, there are always going to be critics. You're always going to have somebody who is going to be voicing an opinion about something that they don't agree with, because the problem is that a national governing body can't run on a kind of consensus basis. Like, they can't just try and please all the people all the time, because quite often the decisions that they make may not be the best suited to specific individuals' own goals and ambitions.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're making everybody happy, you're definitely doing your job wrong as a governing body. So
that's exactly
I appreciate
right.
your perspective on that. And it's good to hear. We are going to be speaking to Mike Neely pretty soon. So I'll be curious to see what he's got in store. But shifting back to the APP itself, not necessarily to compare, but as a definition of what you guys are, you only have 12 events or 13 events a year. Do you do that because you feel like quantity sacrifices the quality? I mean, we obviously have seen how meticulous and well done the production is on the APP very recently. Do you feel like the APP can do more than 12 events without losing that quality? Or tell us a little bit about why the schedule is so much less populated than perhaps the weeks in the year.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm going to go back to how you introduced me to start the answer. So you introduced me as coming from the APP Tour. And the APP Tour is one of the business verticals that we have within the APP. And think of the Association of Pickleball Players as our kind of master brand. Think of that as the kind of parent of the APP Tour, of Next Gen, the development program that Ken's been running and has been championing now for a long time. We also have recently launched a leagues initiative, and we've launched a fundraising program with the American Cancer Society called Doubles Dink for Cancer. We have 12 APP Tour events this year, as you say. We have 5 APP signature events. So we have a women's only event taking place in Columbus in October. We've had a collegiate championships. We had a champions and masters event, the AARP Champions Cup, which we did down in Pictona a few months ago. And then we have other signature events. We then have next gen tournaments. So we have, I think, 3 or 4 next gen events taking place this year, and next gen 2. So the kind of feeder series into next gen. We have collegiate qualifiers taking place. So actually, when you add up the number of events that we're doing, it's actually over about 25. The APP Tour comprises 12 of those, and those are really the kind of highlight events. That is what Newport Beach this coming week, with nearly 1,800 players competing in, that is one of those highlight events. Now, why are we only doing 12 of those? The simple answer to that is because we're fiscally responsible.
What?
We have...
Hey, whoa.
This is pickleball.
That is anathema to pickleball. At least professional pickleball. So, just keep that in mind.
Well, I don't want to comment on other people's burn rates and, where money is being spent. But, we have a finite budget, and we have some very smart people who run our finances. And what we wanted to do was, A, raise prize money for the pro players this year. B, we wanted to...
Thank you, by the way, which has been amazing.
Well, Jenny Klitsch has been the champion of that, and Jenny is, I think, a wonderful ambassador for the game at the pro level, and is a key part of our organisation, and was part of MLP as well. We wanted to extend streaming. Last year, we cut back on the amount of live streaming we were doing from 4 days to 2, and then this year we've extended that to 3 days. We wanted to invest more in that TV production. So you will now see video replays on Championship Court. You will see much more use of graphics in our TV product. You will see better facilities and more attention to detail for all players, amateur and pro. And what we really wanted to do was focus on events where we knew we would be able to serve a really big audience. 1,800 people coming to Newport Beach, I think, speaks volumes. The numbers that we've been setting all year continue to grow. And we're just making sure that we're going to places that really want to have APP pickleball coming to their locales, to their venues. And it's really just about being smart with the finances that we've got. It's about not burning money for the sake of it, because that is just not being responsible to not only our investors and our business, but to the players that enjoy playing with us. We will be here for the long run. We want to be here for decades to come. And the business is built on that sort of platform. So that's why we're doing those 12 tour events, but it's why we've got so many other events taking place as well.
That's a nice segue into a question I had. I heard you guys described the other day as the cockroach that will survive the nuclear pickleball holocaust. And out emerges APP out of the ruins to claim really the world. And I think you guys get underestimated for a few different reasons. But if you're looking at a 10, 15, 20-year time horizon, especially with a lot of these player contracts coming up in 1, 2, 3 years, and you're this freedom tour offering huge prize money, I just think it's interesting. So I don't know if there's a question in there. I played a lot of pickleball this morning. Sorry. YouTube's going to rip me apart on the comments.
So the guy who wrote that comment got an extremely angry text from me pretty shortly after it was published saying, I don't think you would use that language with anybody else. It seems odd that you would choose to use it with me. And he was at great pains to explain to me that it was meant as a compliment. And
I think it's a compliment.
I know, I get that. Me trying to explain that to my boss and to other people, you know, it's kind of tricky. But
Yeah, maybe they should have called you the birds. You know, the birds were the only dinosaurs that escaped the volcanic,
or the phoenix, the phoenix that may rise from the pickleball ashes. I think the other thing is what it speaks to is a slightly kind of maybe a dramatic view of the world of pickleball at the moment. But I understand what the sentiment is. I think one of the things that I would like to talk about, and Jill, it's a great point. I'm not sure if it is a question, but it's a great point because it does lead to a couple of things that I think are really interesting for our future. The APP Tour specifically is a highly competitive tour. It is what you would expect to see with a tour. Players competing for points, which then rewards them prize money, is why we are seeing so many people entering our tournaments. It's why every single match is being played to such an amazingly aggressive extent in many ways. You're seeing real competitors battling it out because they know that the further they go in a tournament, the more prize money they're being awarded. And that means they're being incentivized for performance. You have another business model in the pickleball world, which could be described as an exhibition series, where you have players who are salaried, which means that they are to some extent then disincentivized to compete. If you know you're going to get paid, sometimes you may be asking yourself the question, why do I want to go out and battle today when maybe I'm feeling a bit tired or a bit under the weather, or I'm just not feeling like I really want to go out there and put it all on the line? There are pluses and minuses to both. The exhibition series model is why the Harlem Globetrotters, for example, is such a successful entertainment product. You have great players who are being paid a salary to put on a show that is entertaining for people. And I'm not going to say that another organisation out there is the Harlem Globetrotters, but I think that the term the Harlem Globetrotters in terms of the entertainment factor is a valid comparison. I think at the heart of our organisation is this pure competition. And it is what is attracting sponsors to us. It is what is attracting players to us. It is what is making our competition and our events so attractive to so many people. And it's the basis for long-term success. We believe that we have the right model, and it is a model that is set up for that long-term profitability and to be here for many, many years to come. Would we survive a nuclear war? I don't know if I want to get into that specifically, and I would rather not think of us in the terms that were described.
Sure.
I would look at us more as a kind of phoenix that would rise from the ashes of whatever on earth is going on in the highly complicated world of some of our other friends in this pickleball industry.
I can see the meme in the making right now with the phoenix.
So, Tom, I totally hear everything you're saying, and the notion of an exhibition tour is something we've touched on quite a bit of times on our podcast, and players not playing as hard as perhaps they would if the points were actually meaningful and prize money was actually meaningful. My points are basically meaningless on the PPA because I'm not a signed player, and they'll always look at if someone is signed or not when creating the draws, and then put someone like me with a ton of points in qualifying, which is fine. That's their prerogative. They're a private business. They can do whatever they want. So I totally hear everything you're saying. What would you say to those who are comfortable describing the APP as a feeder tour or not having the highest quality of players? Also, shout out to Chris Hayworth, APP player who just won men's singles at the PPA San Clemente, taking down world number one. That's right. PPA number one, Federico Staxford. But what would you say to those who are calling the APP kind of the feeder tour? And is that how you guys see yourself?
We do not see ourselves like that. I think that the Chris Hayworth who you've just described is proof positive that we have competing within our ranks players who are the equal of, if not better than, players competing anywhere else. The reality is that the general public do not look at one player or another and say that player is significantly better than another player. Particularly if you take people who are new to pickleball, they are just watching people playing a sport that they get quite quickly attracted to, and then hopefully they're going, if they haven't done so before, pick up a paddle and try it for themselves and join the kind of the millions of people who are playing the game. Are we a feeder series? Absolutely not. No. However, we're extremely proud of what we are doing in developing young talent. So Ken Hermann's Next Gen program, which has now expanded to Next Gen 2, has given a pathway to some of the sport's biggest names, from JW in Georgia to Dylan, Jack Munro. Precisely. I mean, we have a very long list of players who've come through those ranks. We now have a national team who are competing on the international stage. We take them over to England. We've taken them to India. We've taken players to Australia.
And they're actually being coached as well, right? It's not just a place for them to play. They're actually being fostered, and their talents are being encouraged by, I know, Chad, right?
Chad Edwards.
And I think Lee Whitwell is also one of your coaches.
Precisely. Yeah, precisely. And there's going to be more of that to come. We recently announced the Fort in Fort Lauderdale as our official headquarters. When the first images of the Fort started coming out, everybody in pickleball was salivating over what it will be the single best venue in the world for pickleball. The first ever stadium court.
Will you tell our audience a little bit about the Fort, because it's truly amazing?
It is truly amazing. So the brainchild of a couple of amazing people down in Fort Lauderdale. It is a brand new facility which is being built in what was a piece of parkland that has been now being transformed into this, frankly, this state-of-the-art, world-class, first ever of its kind pickleball facility. So it has a dedicated stadium court with a couple of thousand seats in it. It has, I think I'm right in saying, 42 amateur courts.
Yep.
It is genuinely going to be the standard setup for how pickleball venues should be thought out and managed and run.
And it's got that sunken championship court with stadium seating all around it, right? To actually accommodate 5,000-10,000 people?
It's several thousand. I'm not sure of the exact number, but there's a really important point here, which is as we are constructing that facility, we're able to do things like look at how we build the broadcast infrastructure into a new facility. Instead of coming into a venue, many of which have never even thought about the fact that they're going to host televised tournaments, we're now able to go in with production experts and actually build out the foundations for how we're going to televise tournaments there in the future. But additionally, that is going to be the home to the Next Gen program. We're going to have young pros being able to be based there, being able to train there, being able to be coached there. We have so many exciting plans coming out of the Fort. You can probably tell how excited I am about it. It is, but that is also the first of many. We have other facilities that we are now starting to partner with because we want to be able to bring the APP ethos to venue owners across the country who share our vision and ultimately want to make sure that everybody who comes and plays in their facilities does so with a big smile on their face and feels like they're being included rather than being excluded, which is what happens quite often at some other organisations where they put up barriers to prevent people getting in and being able to play whenever they want.
Totally. And that facility sounds absolutely amazing. Can you speak a little bit to any facility owners out there who might potentially want to be the type of venue that can host the best of the best in an APP Tour event? Because we've seen kind of the mix of sometimes facilities that were originally made for tennis that are almost too big at times for pickleball, and it makes it look like the crowds are not as compact. And we've seen obviously a lot of events where they're so cloistered that you can hardly, find elbow room. What would you describe as like the sweet spot for a pickleball facility if someone's out there trying to create it?
So I think what you're going to see in Newport Beach this week is going to be pretty close to what we would envision as being the kind of ideal venue for where we are right now in the life cycle of the APP and of pickleball today. We've got a bit of a change for anybody who's played at Newport Beach. We're switching championship court there because we want to make sure that we can build a kind of stadium within the venue that gives the best showcase for the best pro players in front of a really good audience, and being able to capture the best TV imagery that we can do. The championship court that has been in place at that venue, we're now bigger than that. We now have a large LED screen, which is helping us fulfill sponsor obligations. We introduced virtual graphics onto our TV product. We were the first ever to do that. So we now have digital banners on our TV shows, which means we're giving more exposure to sponsors, all of which, again, is about being able to increase prize money and being able to increase the experience for everybody. So I think when you look at venues like Newport Beach, that is a really, really amazing place to be going to play. The weather's great. There's a huge demand for playing high level pickleball there. But I think you're right. It's a really interesting point, because I think we're almost at a tipping point in terms of kind of venue selection, where you have facilities which on paper, even maybe a year ago, would have been able to satisfy our needs. And now we're just not able to accommodate what we need to put on, not just for the pros, but for the amateurs as well, and making sure that our partners have enough space on site to be able to engage with people, that we can put our own tour store up in a location where people can come and buy the hoodies and the T-shirts and the caps and everything that they want to buy. And ultimately that we can really create an environment and an atmosphere that is really a kind of celebration of pickleball. So it really interestingly, just this morning, I've been having 2 separate conversations with people on LinkedIn who reached out cold to me, both saying, I'm building a facility. What do I need to do to be able to host APP events in the future? Yeah. And one of the first places we guide them is USAP, and say, have a look at what it takes to have a sanctioned tournament. USAP have some guidelines on court spaces and on some of the kind of basics that you would need from a competition perspective. And then have a conversation with us. We'd love to talk. We want to talk to anybody who has good ideas about being able to host pickleball tournaments in the future. It really is a kind of philosophy of ours that we say yes to good ideas, and then we try and make them happen. So that's going to mean some expansion of our events next year. I mentioned that we're doing kind of north of 25 already. There's going to be more than that again next year, and that's going to give more opportunity for even more venues to come and host with us tournaments that are going to be able to host, frankly, hopefully, many more thousands of people.
That's awesome. I look forward to that.
I want to rewind just 1 second. When I saw Ken Hermann in Sacramento, he emphasized how important it is to tell stories, have player storylines. And you guys obviously don't see yourselves as a feeder tour, but how do you build your business, continue to invest in players, next-gen players, pro players, when your best ones get swooped up, so to speak, by the PPA? How do you defend yourself against that without going away from your ethos and your business model? Is that something that keeps you guys up at night?
It absolutely isn't, partly because there is such a great pipeline of talent coming through, but also I think because of the way that the pickleball audience engages with those stories. People in the social media age are much more used to being able to engage with short form content and in very rapid fire style. We all sit there kind of flicking through stuff on TikTok or on Instagram or Facebook, or I think we have to call it X now. I think although he started suggesting it was going to be Twitter.
We like to
again,
call
so.
it the
platform formerly known as Twitter.
I'll go with that. Yeah,
the artist formerly known.
Yeah, I think the really important piece of this it is to make world-class stories and world-class content that people want to come to, whether or not that person is part of your world for a day, a week, a month, a year, or for however long they're part of your world. One of the things that I asked for when I joined the APP was a commitment to be able to produce content to the level that I'm used to in Formula One, or in Major League Soccer, or in the Olympic Games, or with Red Bull, or with the America's Cup. that means the kind of level of production standards that you would expect to see on some of the world's biggest brands and some of the world's biggest sports. And APP's parent company, Intersport, it has that at its root. You know, they produce some of the world's biggest sports event. They produce them both in terms of the venues and the operational elements, but also the TV production. They've won multiple Emmys for TV broadcasts, so they know exactly what it takes to make really great content. And thankfully, the APP have faith in me and the team that I work with, who I genuinely believe set the standard for the way that content should be produced in pickleball. I have some incredibly smart people who I'm extremely lucky to work with, who are much more creative than honestly anybody I've ever worked with throughout my career. Every single day there are kind of group chats going on about, like, here's a new creative thing that we want to try today. It could be something shot with a phone. It could be something shot with a full camera crew. It could be a still image, could be a graphic. And I'm so privileged that I get to work with people who every single day are trying to come up with new, fun, engaging ways of telling stories. So if that means somebody comes into our world and does something incredible for one day, we're going to tell a great story about that. If they're going to be with us for 10 years, we'll tell great stories about them. So I don't think that the transient nature of sport, in any sport, I don't think it's just pickleball, it's any sport. Players move teams, players move organizations. Formula One drivers move teams. You know, soccer players move from the best football team in the world, Manchester United, to lower ranked teams like Real Madrid and Manchester City and others that I shouldn't really be speaking about. So, you know, you can you tell the stories that you have available to you, and you tell them as well as you can. And I'm really privileged that I get the chance to do that.
So you touched a little bit on streaming, and I actually have a complaint. And I know our viewers and listeners are shocked because I usually only complain about, you know, other tours and other events. But I believe it or not, I can complain about everyone equally. I'm an equal opportunity complainer. And so sometimes with your guys' streaming, I think you're cutting off your nose to spite your face because the quality is amazing. But I'd love to see forecourt streamed. I'd love to see round one to the finals so you have the whole narrative to tell, right? Like you turn on ESPN and then all of a sudden it's like, boom, you know, Braverman in the semifinals. But how did she get there? And as a viewer, you can't invest in that. You can't see that. You can't get on the ride with that narrative because you guys aren't streaming it. So is it literally that you want to do it perfect or not at all?
Great question, and I'm really pleased you asked it because it is one of the hot topics within the kind of inside world of pickleball. There's a couple of simple answers to that. One of them is about that fiscally responsible point. We want to be able to put on the best possible show that showcases the players as well as we can, whether it's in the environment live at venue or whether it's on a screen. It would be relatively easy for us to be able to put up a single camera on multiple courts. You then also, I think, have to have a score bug, which means you have to have somebody who's dedicated to getting the score right. But the quality of that is just not good. It's just not to the standard that I want to be able to present, not just to players, but also importantly to sponsors. The audience numbers also, frankly, do not justify the expense of live streaming all of those extra courts. And that is part and parcel, I think, of taking a long-term view of the development of the sport. You know, we used to do 4 days of every single tournament. We cut back to 2 because we wanted to be careful and sensible with our money, and using a finite budget where we thought it was being best used. And in that case, that was about increasing prize money. And then through that kind of careful planning, we've been able to extend to 3 days. In future, we should be putting ourselves in a position where we can extend the number of courts that are being streamed. But I also want to make sure that when we're doing that we're doing it to a standard that matches the expectations set for our championship court. So that may not mean having multiple cameras on every single court, but it does mean, I think, being able to present a product that an increasing audience will be tuning into, and not tuning into it thinking, well, this doesn't look great. This doesn't look like what I'm used to seeing when I tune into Fox or CBS or to ESPN. So Jill, unfortunately, I share your frustration in that I know you, because you're a extremely high profile player and a voice within the sport, and you want to have it all now, here, right now. You want to have everything that the sport will one day have.
Well,
And
I'm a millennial.
share
It's my
that.
birthright to have everything yesterday. So, Tom, what do you want from me?
Well, I think that it is that push and it's that drive that is frankly forcing us to continue to develop and to continue to be smart and sensible with what we do, so that one day we can achieve those goals. But in order for us to be profitable and in order for us to have a healthy long-term future, we have to sometimes take hard decisions. And those hard decisions include really big ticket items like TV production. As I say, I don't want to put on a subpar product that is not going to meet the aspirations of a future audience to satisfy the needs of a, honestly, small live stream audience as it is today. That doesn't keep those folks happy. And I know that because I read the comments every single day.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Someone commented, another really educated, high quality YouTube comment. Nobody watches the APP anyway, something like that. And I said, well, I actually wrote back personally and said, well, I think you're thinking a little small. You're thinking about the 50,000 diehard YouTube watchers on Grandstand Court 3 who are obsessive and in the comments and in the live chat. And I think we can all get really focused on those 50,000 people when you guys are also pulling in, 200,000-300,000 on ESPN, on CBS Sports, on Fox Sports. So you're looking at capturing those eyeballs in addition to the 50,000 and not catering to or building a product that puts you guys in a fiscally irresponsible position for the 50,000 diehards. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's exactly right. Except let me just correct, if I may, a couple of things. So one is, yes, the viewing figures across the kind of primary entities in pickleball are all actually pretty comparable. We're all pretty much the same.
Wow.
We are referred to by some of the sport broadcasters as the acronyms, because in their world, they see almost no difference between the products that are being put on their screens and as part of their agreements. They're also seeing almost no difference in the viewing figures, which is why they see us all as pretty similar. They don't differentiate between the players that are being featured on them. What they do tell us is that our production values are the best in class. And I think you only have to look at what we've been doing this year with the integration of more and better graphics throughout production that is really kind of setting the standard. And then when we're doing things like introducing shuffle, for example, new competition formats that are specifically designed to try and engage, both the pickleball fans and new fans.
Yeah, for those of you who didn't watch the shuffle, it was a really cool format where it more replicated the typical behavior at a rec court and kind of established one player as like the queen of the day, going from pools of 16 and whittling down with partner swapping, and really enjoyed.
Sorry, if I got second, does that make me the princess?
No, I think that makes you the jester.
Oh, the jester. That makes sense.
It's a big leap down.
I think it's is it not the Duchess of the court? I think it's something
you'd be the expert. I definitely defer to you.
Obviously, because I'm
royalty.
so royal. As a side note, I thought it was hugely flattering to see a senior executive from one of the other organisations tweeting after the shuffle, "We should do a shuffle. What do you guys think?"
I totally saw that. Yeah,
I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Imitation is the most sincere form of flattery.
Man.
Anyway, so here's the other point. You mentioned 50,000. Nobody in pickleball has ever had 50,000 people tuning into a live stream.
Correct.
Not one single person. The numbers, if anybody's getting 20% of that, they're doing extremely well. There have been some very large claims made about kind of amplified social media numbers. Somebody once described like hundreds of millions of views of what's going on. I see the data. I know what the numbers are, and honestly, those hardcore fans, if they number 10,000 at best, I'd be absolutely stunned. Wow. The reality is, the audience currently does not justify that expense. That's not to say that they won't in future, and they are an incredibly important part of the audience mix, because they're the folks who are forcing us to innovate. They're the folks who are giving us ideas, and if we can keep them satisfied as best we can within the kind of constraints that we operate under, then I think we've done something really important. But
it seems to me that there's a little bit of a disagreement among peers that the person flipping channels who's going to come upon pickleball being the most important in a way where you're going to really crack through those numbers versus that diehard that Jill speaks of, which is already a smaller crowd compared to the, say, sometimes numbered in the 30 million for the players. But to me, it seems like every sport I see, Formula One especially, and including basketball and MLS, you have to capture the person who doesn't play the sport at all. Mm-hmm. Agree? Is that not what's most important in the future of the money and the sponsorship and the viewership of the sport? We've got to captivate the person who's like, I don't play pickleball at all, but I love watching it.
Great point. And you've got right to the heart of, I think, what our fundamental philosophy is. Our research tells us that nearly 50 million adult Americans in the last 12 months have picked up a paddle. So that's research conducted by YouGov, one of the world's leading research firms, trusted by all sorts of government.
And that's just
entities
America. I mean, the world is just
the USA.
Ripe for the taking. I think the reasons it's popular here, other than perhaps that we have a little bit more ease of space and land, but the reasons the sport itself is so popular is going to be true in absolutely every corner of the earth, including, Africa and Australia and India and Asia. We're seeing it grow so much in Europe.
Well,
so I'm excited to see that.
There's two great pieces of evidence for that. The English Open, which is taking place in August this year, they're going to have over 2,000 people competing in that tournament.
Wow.
Last year they had about 1,000. 2 years ago, I think they had 400. So, where I come from, where there are multiple tennis courts sitting there doing nothing for most of the year, the game is exploding there. I was recently in Bermuda, an island that I lived in for a year while working on the America's Cup. In Bermuda, with a total population of 60,000, they have 42 courts already on that island.
Wow, they might be rivaling Utah now for the population per court.
Yeah, per capita.
I would say it's way above, honestly, per capita. They also, the Pickleball Association of Bermuda, are by far the best organized group of people I've ever met in setting up a national governing body for a sport. Wow. They are serious individuals who have some very big aspirations for how transformative the sport can be for an island like Bermuda. Amazing people, really clever, and it's so exciting to go over there and see that. But the reality, again, like the reality of the growth of the game is it will come from people, as you say, Kristin, who are switching it on, turning over to it and saying, I may not play, but I want to watch that. Mm-hmm. But to me, this is why the grassroots is so important. This is why you alienate them at your absolute peril. Because if you engage the grassroots, if you engage the recreational player and you make them feel good about themselves and you make them feel included by being inclusive, what you are doing is building an engagement with an audience that numbers in the millions. And then you have the opportunity to drip feed into the conversations that you have with that audience the very best players playing at that elite level. Now, I see it like running, and I've used this analogy before. Millions of people go running every single day. Millions on treadmills around the neighborhood, in gyms, wherever they go. Ask 100 runners to name 5 pro runners, and unless it's the 2 weeks of a 4-year summer Olympic cycle, I can guarantee you they'll say Usain Bolt, Michael Johnson, Carl Lewis, Flojo, maybe
Prefontaine.
Well, see, now you're getting into real detail. So
now way back.
This is the same conversation with pickleball. Millions of people play pickleball. Ask those millions to name you 5 pro athletes. Our research tells us how low that number is, even among pickleball players.
Yeah,
Why?
I think Nike has done more to promote the names of elite athletes than any sport in and of itself, which just goes to show how eyeballs and namesake are really kind of grown. And it's not necessarily those diehards who watch SportsCenter every single night and can name, the 5th man on every NBA team.
That's exactly it. That's because you have people playing pickleball all over the country every single day, hardcore fanatics down to people who play in a pair of jeans and holding a beer. And you need to have a relationship with those folks in order to showcase and kind of drip feed into real, authentic, honest conversations. That's where you find your audience growth. That's why for us, it's so important that we have those relationships.
I kind of look at tennis and what tennis has done such a good job of. And there aren't a lot of things, to be honest. Tom, I don't know if you knew this, but I worked at UTR. Did you know that?
I did know that, yes.
Yeah. And so I have friends that love watching the US Open. I'm like, why? You don't play tennis? You don't even tune into tennis. She's like, yeah, we just love watching the US Open. Oh my God. One year we went, it was the most magical experience. It was this, that. So I could see tennis continuing to be the sport that doesn't have humongous participation, yet they've got the viewership. And you could say that it's because it's balletic, it's beautiful, whatever. They've figured out whatever strengths, right, they needed to double down on to grab those eyeballs. And they have a ton of eyeballs from non-participants. And a lot of that is gambling too. What are your thoughts on that? Am I thinking about this right?
Let's come back to the gambling point. You are absolutely right. My mother, who pretty much hates all sports, particularly those I work in for some reason, I don't know if everyone's that. She pretty religiously tunes into Wimbledon every single year, but doesn't watch any or engage with any other sport. Mm-hmm. And it's because it's part of heritage. It's because the foundations have been laid by the French Open, by the Australian Open, by the Grand Slam tournaments. They are marquee, standout events that transcend sport. They're cultural events in their own right. This probably doesn't mean a huge amount to most of the people watching and listening to this, but there's a music festival in England every year called the Glastonbury Festival. And it just happened this past weekend. Huge festival, like I think 300,000 people go every single year. And it attracts a huge array of people who wouldn't normally go to a music festival because it's a cultural phenomenon. The US Open is the same. And the goal for us long term has to be to build that sort of equity in standout events. USA Pickleball Nationals is that sort of
tentpole event.
Precisely. And it is around those sort of events, repeated year in, year out, that people start to really buy into the heritage of them and really build an emotional connection with them. That means that they want to return and they want to tell their friends about them, which is why, again, having relationships with facilities where you build long-term audiences is such a critical part of this. You mentioned gambling. Can we just touch on that? Because I think this is, again, back to the conversation about the importance of independence. Gambling will be part of pickleball in the future. It is inevitable it will, because pickleball can fill a space for a lot of gambling companies that are not filled by Monday Night Football or by kind of more traditional sports broadcast in traditional time slots. But in order to have gambling in place, there needs to be some very, very serious governance and some regulations in place that prevent any form of corruption within that piece of the sport.
Yeah, talk about something tennis has not done well.
Well, from dope testing, from organisations signing up to the WADA code internationally, through to having independence for players, where honestly the salaried model lends itself very neatly to issues that can be created within gambling. So I think gambling is going to be an important part of the sport. But we're a long way from that, and having independent governance of various aspects of the sport is critical to have that in place before anybody can honestly place a bet, knowing that their bet is being administered in a fair, independent
manner. So do you think
Right.
the gambling that has existed thus far in pickleball and exists sporadically right now is essentially reckless?
I think reckless is a strong word. I think it's probably a toe in the water. I personally find it very odd that gambling companies are taking the risk of making investments in that space at the moment.
Yeah.
I worked in the gambling industry for about a year and a half, so I'm aware of some of the regulations that companies need to go through to be able to get into it. But you need to have so many checks and balances in place to ensure that fairness is being activated at every single level, not just from the players, but from the officials who are independently adjudicating what's going on in those games.
No question. So what time horizon would you project? Is this a 6 month, a 6 year? How quickly might we see that happen?
Great question. I think it's tied to the Olympics point. One of my colleagues believes that we will be an Olympic sport by 2032. That obviously puts us post LA 2028. I personally think it's going to be longer than that. I think that while there may be an opportunity for it to be an exhibition sport in 32, I think it's more likely to be 36. Dope testing is one of the highest priorities for gambling. I don't want to get into that conversation perhaps on this podcast, because it's going to open some doors that are contentious at best. But having a standardized code of ethics and regulations that govern all players worldwide, I think is going to be a really important part of having gambling being able to be set up and run properly. What you can't have is one set of rules in one country that players play to, and then them being able to go off to another country to be able to satisfy a gambling market that may be operating in a grey area. Gambling isn't even actually available across the United States yet. You only have a certain number of states where gambling is legal. So that opens up the opportunity for grey markets, which in itself is potentially a problem. I think we're years away from it.
Yeah. Super interesting. I have one final big question for Tom. So it's a softball question. Like 7 podcasts ago, we titled our pod "The Bifurcation of the Sport," right? We kind of knew or called that UPA was going to be coming out with their own governing body, but it's so much more than that. It's actually this broader bifurcation where you have APP, UTR, your new rating system, not just of you, but also USAP, and then USAP. So you have those 3 entities, APP, UTR, and USAP, who've drawn or who are on one side of the battle lines. On the other side, you have PPA, MLP, and this UPAA. So let's fast forward 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. What does the future of pickleball look like?
Well, firstly, I'm glad you didn't actually ask me about softball, because I know absolutely nothing about softball. So I'm very glad that this was a...
No, just asking you to oracle and predict the future and like who's going to be dead, who's alive. We already know you're the Phoenix, but yeah, talk to us about that looks like.
Can you analogize it to the British royalty? Go.
Yeah, I'll do my best. So Princess Diana did not die. She's going to rise again. This is...
Cool. They'll love that.
The conspiracy theories are all true. Where will we be in 5 years' time? Well, the APP
can everyone survive? Is it possible that everyone's around in 3 years?
Yeah, I think it's eminently possible that everybody's around, because we have different models. As I've touched on before, the APPs is a competition first model. It is one that incentivizes and rewards real competition that athletes want to be able to take part in. The other organization, as I said, could be potentially described as an exhibition series. And I think there's always going to be an audience for that. The kind of Harlem Globetrotters style entertainment approach is one that people do want to see. But ultimately, one of sport's great points is unpredictability. One of the reasons that people tune in to watch sport week in, week out, and all sorts of sport, is because they don't know who's going to win, and the team or the players that they support, that they love, should be, by being in the right place at the right time, able to have their day. And that's really at the kind of the very heart of what the APP is all about. USA Pickleball is going from strength to strength, and as the game grows internationally, Kristin, you touched on its international growth earlier, it is rapidly expanding worldwide, and USA Pickleball is the model for how an NGB should be set up. So other countries are looking at that and are saying we can take inspiration from that. So the USAP are going to lead the Olympic charge, and then UTR Jill, as you know, UTR is an absolutely dominant force in tennis and is now applying that same amount of resource and smart thinking and clever people and the investment that they've made in another racket sport into pickleball. They are going to be an absolutely dominant force in pickleball in years to come. We're incredibly excited about our future, and really excited, I think, about maintaining this same inclusive approach, so that whether you're coming to play in one of our tournaments now and you're coming for the first time, or whether you've played since we started in 2019, we're going to be offering the same experience, just a little bit better every single tournament, every single year for years to come. So I'd love to come back on in 5 years' time. Hopefully we don't leave it 5 years, but I'd love to come back on in 5 years'
6 months.
time.
We'd like to have you back on.
I can do 6 months.
6 months.
And you know, and look back on what we talked about today. Hopefully some of what I've said has come true, and we can all have a great chat again.
Well, I just want to thank you for creating opportunities for not just pros, for amateurs, for next gen players, for all of your employees. I think if I understood correctly, you're now serving more pros than anyone. Like, you guys are having pre-qualifiers.
We are, yeah. Demand is that high.
Wow.
So I think what you said was more pros than anyone anywhere.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. You know, hundreds of pro players, hundreds of people who are seeing the opportunity to come into this sport. Honestly, and you know, this isn't trying to blow smoke, but that's because players like you have set the standard and they want to come and try and take your crown. So, you know, we offer the opportunity to do that.
Does a duchess have a crown?
A tiara.
I have a tiara.
Then you're good.
That's even better.
Hey,
Good.
Doesn't mess up your hair in the back, you know?
they can come at me. I've got this thing glued on. They're going to have to rip my hair off to get my tiara.
Well, we can't thank you enough, Tom, for joining the pod. We've taken up way too much of your time talking about the important things like British royalty and the tiaras. So we hope,
And F1.
Yes.
And your mom.
We hope our audience enjoyed that little purview into the world of the APP and the APP Tour, not to be confused. But we welcome you in the future and look forward to seeing what the rest of the year provides for the APP.
Thank you. This has been great. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for the chance to talk about us.
Absolutely.
All right, Joy Riders, we hope you enjoyed our interview with Tom Webb as much as we did. You are not going to want to miss our next podcast. We have had a slew, Kristin, of 4 amazing guests.
And more to come.
Tell our listeners who we have up next.
We have none other than the Breakers' dynamic duo, the GM and owner, Jeff Nguyen for the win, and Scott Crandall, the coach of all coaches. So that Scott Crandall episode is not to be missed if you at all care about pickleball strategy and pickleball improvement. Everything we talked about with Scott, it was like everything else that happened in the week reminded me of that conversation. So you definitely want to check that one out.
All right, so don't forget, you guys, pickleball is joy.
Don't let anyone tell you differently.
We out.
We out.
This pickleball life.